In 2006, Sega was planning on releasing their first console since the Dreamcast. The console was similar to the current Nintendo Wii, except the controller looked a bit more like a Dreamcast controller. The 7th generation console was called Sega Legacy. The first and only game ever worked on for the Legacy was a new game to go along with the console, obviously, as one normally does, called Sonic Legacy. It was pretty much the original Sonic the Hedgehog, except the graphics were in 3D and there was first-person view enabled. Sounds like a cool console, huh? I mean, maybe? Everything was going better than expected. Before they announced it as finished, Sega gave the Sega Legacy to 5 employees who had kids. They wanted the kids to test out the console and see how they liked it. 2 of the families refused, but the other 3 were more than happy to test it out. Sega even promised them a free console afterwards. 2 days later, one of the employees, names will not be given, 8-year-old son, was playing Sonic Legacy. After he had gone to bed at 10 p.m., he woke up at random and turned on the Legacy. A few minutes later, he walked into his parents' room. His eyes were widened and he had an eerie smile. "What is it, son?" asked the father. The boy stood there with a big grin on his face. "I'm Robotnik," he said in a raspy voice. The voice was distorted and muffled. Suddenly, the lights went out. The power was out all night long. In the morning, the mother went to wake their son for school. He wasn't there. Nobody ever found him. Similar occurrences happened to the other families. Sega was alarmed and visited each of the families. The families returned the consoles. The Sega employees and programmers decided to play Sonic Legacy to see if it had anything to do with anything. The cheerful title screen ran. Since the programmers created the game, they easily went through the game. However, during the final boss battle with Robotnik, something odd happened. The audio began to sound distorted. Suddenly, the game paused. Sonic began to smile. They went to a cutscene. The programmers and employees stared at each other in shock. The big shock was that no Sonic game had ever contained a cutscene in the middle of a final boss. A cartoon Sonic sat down on a rock. He was looking at something glowing. The glowing stopped, and they cut to the body of Robotnik. The eyes were torn out, some hair was pulled out. He was bleeding from wrinkles. How do you bleed from wrinkles? And his nose was jerked to the right. Sonic began to cut open the body, and he put the body over his body. Sonic now looked like Robotnik. That's the worst, that's the one worst fucking line out of this whole thing, and I will tell you why when I'm doing my recap. It then showed another Sonic running around. The Sonic dressed up as Robotnik gave an evil smile. The programmers and employees shook in terror. The fact that Sonic defeats his enemy, becomes Robotnik, and gets killed by another Sonic boggled their minds. It was a terrifying chain of suicide. All events after the cutscene finished are unknown. All that is known is that there was another cutscene afterwards. From the other room, people claim to hear a man speaking in Russian in a distorted voice. Here we go with more fucking distortion, everybody. When they came back in the room, they found everybody lying there dead with their eyes ripped out. However, 2 of the employees survived. One is blind and is confined in a wheelchair for life. He refuses to speak to anyone besides his family and close friends. The other employee is able to see, but he has never spoken about his experience. He is unable to be outside without someone with him, and is said to have recurring nightmares. All copies of the Sonic Legacy game were said to be destroyed. This led to the cancellation of the Sega Legacy console. In 2009, an avid video game bootlegger found a Sega Legacy. The eerie part is that he was able to play Sonic Legacy on the console without the CD. A few days later, he was found dead in his closet, where he had hung himself. So this is just a warning to all people curious. Don't try to find the Sega Legacy. unless you're either willing to risk your life or suffer from recurring nightmares and demons. Okay, so this review is going to be a little bit different because there was some potential to the story. It had a good idea, but it wasn't executed to its full potential. Now let me explain. I like the concept of an unreleased console. I like lost media and stuff like that in general. That's my favorite topic. I eat that shit like fucking crack cocaine. Yeah, you fucking eat crack. That's what you do with it. But things were described in pretty poor detail. And I understand this is supposed to be sort of a short story, but a little more effort should have been put into the writing aspect. The thought process was great, but you needed to write this in some more detail. For instance, I read back a line of this, specifically the part where Sonic put Robotnik's body on as a skin suit. I read that part to my friend Johnny, who is starting his own YouTube channel here in this coming little bit, and when he puts out his first video, we'll be sure to give him a shout out on my social media and whatnot. But he has literary experience, and he told me, he said, you can make something like Sonic putting on Robotnik as a skin suit scary. You just need the right amount of detail written in. And I have to agree. You know, not like a first-person perspective, you know, from Sonic or whatever, because this was written from a third-person perspective, but describe the visuals and all that. Don't get into, like, all the, you know, cliche shit, like, the blood, all that. But see if you can find like a sweet spot between detail and avoiding cliche. And then you got into the part where there was like a second Sonic running around and it's like an endless chain of suicide, and that's just that part was fucking stupid, I will have to admit. That wouldn't be shocking to anyone. It would just confuse the shit out of people. It's like, what the fuck? There's another Sonic running around? What's going on here? Also, cut back on the usage of the word distorted a little bit. Like, not everything has to sound distorted, but I also wonder why this console just all of a sudden became haunted out of nowhere, or this game became haunted out of nowhere, and why when people play this game, weird shit happens to them, like they all die with their eyeballs ripped out, or, you know, become Robotnik and their voices distorted and muffled, or hang themselves in their closet. Because this was made by Sega, developed by Sega, and then went straight to their employees' children. So what third party got in the middle of this and, you know, possessed it and whatnot? Because this is a case of like a fucking possessed game / console. And it's not really scary enough to be one of those fear of the unknown sort of things. So I would have liked a little bit of backstory to what caused that, or maybe even a sequel. But this pasta wasn't good enough to warrant a sequel, let's be honest. To wrap things up, it had potential, but it didn't execute it well. I'm gonna ultimately give this one a 2 out of 5 dog shits. Had a good idea, it just didn't run with it. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Undercooked Creepypasta. It might have been a little short, but it's just something to let you guys know this series is still going on, and consider this a season 3 opener. I will see you all next time. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. That's the end.